What's going on, YouTube? Legend here once again. This time at you again with some more, of course, Genshin Impact. I actually want to talk to you guys a little bit about Ayato. Yes, Ayato is coming out soon, and you know, a lot of people are trying to figure out if they should summon for him. And a lot of people are, what they're going to do is they're going to start comparing him to another hydro damage dealer called Childe, right? Now, I mean Childe, like not like the kid Childe. I mean like Tartaglia, you know. And Tartaglia is one of my main guys, you know, and I love him. So even me, I'm kind of comparing them too and seeing, like, you know, if you have Childe or Tartaglia, is it worth getting Ayato? And I'm gonna sit here and try and just kind of just break down what the similarities and the differences are between them, and hopefully that helps you come up with an informed decision of whether you should go for either one of them, right? So first, let's talk about some of the similarities, right? So, of course, obviously, they're both hydro damage dealers, right? Both main DPSs. I mean, when you try and bring terms like enabler in and so on and so forth, you might say, oh, well, Childe's an enabler. And, you know, honestly, Ayato might be too. We'll see, you know? That's what they both are. They're both hydro damage dealers, and they both are good at taking on AoE situations, right? So, when I say that, I mean, you got Ayato's wide slashes and you got Childe's, you know, his Riptide slashes, right? So the thing with that too is that his Riptide slashes and Ayato's Q both have quadratic scaling, right? So it means that each one of their attacks has an AoE blast that can affect multiple enemies, and then having that happen multiple times and at once, it's gonna hit all those enemies together, meaning that it's going to multiply the damage in AoE situations, right? So they both do that, so they're both going to be really good at AoE situations. So that's when it comes to that. So that's another similarity with them. And also too, they're both normal attackers. So since they're both normal attackers, I mean, Childe does do his charge attacks too, but a lot of them they'll do normal attackers. So when it comes to like artifact sets and so on and so forth, they might have some similarities. Like when it comes to the Hydro set or Shiminawa, they both can use those sets, you know? So that's another thing that's similar to them, right? And also too, another thing about them too is they both have a good set of weapons to use, especially when it comes to their 5-star weapon options, right? The 5-star weapon options, most 5-star bows and most 5-star swords are going to work well on Ayato. Even Skyward Blade, right, is going to work well on him, you know? Obviously, there's going to be some better than the others, but you know, that's the idea. If you have a 5-star weapon, then you're looking good, you know? Even when it comes to bows, you have Skyward Harp, which I use. You have, you know, Yoimiya's bow. You have Polar Star, which is his best bow, you know? You have, you know, all those different options for him, right? And then there's also some 4-star options that are good for him too, right? Or both of them. So that's when it comes to that, right? But now let's just get into specifics when it comes to the differences between them, right? So now let's talk about Childe, right? So here are the things that when it comes to Childe that are just more specific to him, right? Now, the thing is with Childe is that Childe has very low support capabilities, right? Now he can be an enabler, right? Like for Xiangling, he's constantly applying Hydro, you know, his ICD, you know, has no holds bar, you know, he's doing his auto attacks, his charge attacks, he's just applying Hydro everywhere with his bursts, all kinds of stuff, right? But when he's off the field, he doesn't have much support capabilities when it comes to that, right? Unless you have a C4, then he can apply Hydro off field. But otherwise, most people don't have that. And so he's a little bit more selfish than Ayato is going to be when it comes to that, right? So that's the thing. So when you're looking at Childe, you're gonna just have him on the field dealing damage, and when he's off the field, that's the end of that, right? Like, yeah, some of his Riptides can explode when you kill an enemy, and they do last a while, but that's very minimal, you know? Also, another thing with him is that Childe is that he has longer uptime on the field. Ayato has his skill up, but it only lasts a few seconds, right? So if you have Childe on the field, he's gonna be able to do more damage over time than him, whereas Ayato's more meant to be in smaller bursts, right? So that's when it comes to that. You know, they just kind of have different play styles in terms of when it comes to field time. So that's another difference when it comes to that. So another difference when it comes to Childe actually is that he also is going to be able to nuke, right? Ayato doesn't have any like big hitting ults. His ult is more of a passive damage type of thing. Whereas Childe just nukes. He's gonna vaporize and he's gonna just do a big, multiplier nuke and just be able to take down a bunch of enemies when it comes to that, right? Or a big enemy, something like that. So Ayato doesn't have that same thing. So he doesn't have that big instance of damage, that big, damage per screenshot nuke, So that's another thing with that too. So that's something to take into account. Another thing is that for Childe, he's more mobile, because when it comes to Ayato, it seems when he's doing his skill, he's in place. Even though he has these big slashes that does reach pretty far, he's still pretty immobile when he's doing that. Whereas Childe can run around the field and do all kinds of stuff, So in situations where crowd control isn't the greatest, Childe might be better in those situations, So that's the thing when it comes to that. But those are some differences when it comes to Childe. But now let's talk about Ayato, right? Let's just talk about his normal attacks, right? His normal attacks does have a pretty large reach, right? So when you're seeing him do his slashes, they're taking up a good amount of space on the field, right? So he's gonna be able to hit an enemy over here. He's gonna be able to hit an enemy over there at the same slash. So that's the thing when it comes to that. Whereas Childe, you have to get more up close and personal, and sometimes you have to run from one enemy to the next, so on and so forth. Unless you have like Veritas and Hunt or something like that. But otherwise, Ayato seems he's gonna have that reach over Childe, right? And also too, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but Ayato does have his burst, which gives off-field Hydra application, right? So that just makes it so he is better in quick swap cost, because he's going to be giving that buff to the team, and Hydra application, right? Buff being, he's buffing on normal attacks and so on and so forth. So that's the thing when it comes to that, right? So he's helping the team out a little bit more. He's not as selfish as Childe when it comes to that, right? And his burst seems to have a pretty large AoE like Ganyu's burst, right? So that's something when it comes to that, right? And also too, when it comes to it, Childe, he doesn't have good single target damage. And now, even though Ayato is actually going to have AoE style damage also, he seems like he's going to be doing stronger normal attack hits. So in single target situations, Ayato is going to beat out Childe, is what it seems like, right? So that's the thing when it comes to that, right? So if that's something that you don't really like about Childe, is that in single target situations, he's just not as good. You don't have to worry about that as much when it comes to Ayato. Ayato still isn't a single target damage dealer, but he's going to be better than Childe when it comes to that, right? If you understand what I mean when I say that, right? And then also too, he does seem to have lower downtime, because like I said, Childe can be on the field longer, but if Childe's on the field longer, then there is penalty for that, right? If he's on the field longer, then that means that he's going to have a longer cooldown, whereas Ayato has a set short cooldown that every time you do your rotation, you come back to him, Ayato's gonna be ready to go, right? So he might be a little bit easier to use for a lot of people that might have had trouble with Childe's cooldowns, right? Unless you have C6, but not a lot of people have that. I don't have that. I don't have C6 Childe. One day we'll see, But that's the thing, So rotation is gonna be a little bit easier when it comes to Ayato, so that's something to keep in mind too. Also, another thing too, speaking of C6, right? So one thing about Childe is that with Constellations at C6, his playstyle changes. You have to worry about that cooldown as long as you do the rotation correctly. And he just becomes a completely different character to the point where people feel that like they're being cheated since they don't have his C6. Whereas Ayato isn't like that. Ayato just gets more powerful with Constellations, right? But he doesn't change as a character. His kit stays the same, right? So he's a little bit more balanced when it comes to that. So that's something to take into account too, if you're like trying to see what the difference is going to be with, C6 and CZ or Ayato. So it's not something you really have to worry about. But you'll see when the official information comes out to kind of judge that yourself. But that's the thing, right? But those are kind of like just the main differences when it comes to them. Based on that, hopefully that can help you decide on which one you really want. As for me, what I want to do, what I think is that I have a C4 Childe, right? My Childe is C4, so he does do off-field Hydra application. So if I wasn't planning on making any content with Ayato, I probably wouldn't get him because of that. That's kind of what my decision is, right? Now, granted, this is pre-release, so like I haven't played with him myself, so I could change my mind when I get my hands on him and start playing and so on and so forth. I could decide to say, oh well, you know, maybe Ayato's better than I gave him credit for, so on and so forth. Because even though I did say in the video that I thought he was gonna be broken, but that was before beta, that was before I knew his kit, that was just basically speculation. I still think he's gonna be really good. I kind of put his power level around maybe around Ito's level, except he's gonna be more flexible than Ito can. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts when it comes to that. But I do think that Ayato is going to be a good pick. I am going to get him just for the content purposes. But if I wasn't doing that, I probably would skip him because I have a child with such high investment. Let me know if that helps you guys out when it comes to making a decision when it comes to that. Are you guys going to get Ayato, or are you guys thinking about skipping? You know, tell me. Comment down below what you think your thoughts are. And then also, if you like the video, if you like content like this, you know, go ahead and hit the like button, you know, and also subscribe so you can get more videos and content like this. With that, I'll end it there. Legend out.